2019 City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin our meeting with a roll call.
Good evening, Commission. Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs. Commissioner Sauve.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any introductions this evening?
No, sir.
All right. Approval of agenda. Do I have a commissioner who will move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Sauve. Any changes to the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Moving on to minutes of previous meeting before us this evening, we have November 20th, 2018 and December 18th, 2018 minutes. I would like to take those together unless there's an objection. Do I have someone who will move? Commissioner Trudeau, seconded by Commissioner Woods. Any discussion or changes on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, they are approved. Moving on to reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers and committees, written communications, and petitions. We will begin with our City Council representative, Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually gone from last night's City Council meeting for medical reasons, but the one City Council meeting I don't attend produces headlines such as, City Council passes resolutions to boycott Wendy's and prepare for nuclear emergency. So, it sounded eventful. On the agenda last night, not too many items of particular interest to this body. An annexation of a property we had previously seen on Orchard Hills. Also, of some tangential relevance, a series of contracts for supportive services to affordable housing related functions, and the releasing of funds for contracting the work for infrastructure, both roads, crosswalks, as well as underground infrastructure like sewer and water main.
Great, thank you. Mr. Leonard?
Just in advance, we've got a working session scheduled for next week. I anticipate bringing you language following up on our previous session regarding proposed changes to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. You'll recall that the City Council directed Planning Commission to evaluate one specific and other changes. So based on a preliminary meeting, I'll be bringing some proposed language to that working session, and time permitting, hopefully kickstarting our transit-oriented development zoning district as well.
Great, thank you. Planning Commission officers and committees? Written communications and petitions. We have received some written communications, so please take a look at the packet. All right, moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not on the agenda this evening? So if there's anyone who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to an item that is not on the agenda, please step forward. Seeing. It is. It is, and we will have an opportunity to review that later on. All right, moving on to public hearing scheduled for next business meeting.
Yes, we have one new public hearing scheduled, proposed annexation and zoning for council approval, a request to annex a 1.19 acre parcel at 2705 Newport and zone it R1A. And then we'll have two returning old business items. We will have reconsideration of the Bright Dawn proposed housing development on Burton Road and a proposed special exception use medical marijuana provisioning center located at 202 Miller.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our regular business. Our regular business this evening, our procedure will be to allow the petitioner 10 minutes to present the project to the Planning Commission. We will then get a staff report followed by public comment on that, on the petition, and then we'll go into discussion. So this evening, our first item is 9A, Bristol Ridge Site Plan for City Council approval.
Good
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott Betzel. I am a civil engineer with Midwestern Consulting. We built most of the site plan. With me tonight is Brad Moore. He is the architect of the project. And our client is in the audience, that is Sean LaFear of Norfolk Homes. And so tonight we have a PowerPoint presentation. And Chris, how do I start it? Just click it? All right. Okay. We'll go through this. Bristol Ridge is a condominium development. The owner is Commercial Properties Investors of Pontiac Trail, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Norfolk Development. Norfolk is no stranger to this town. They developed the property to the north of this, the North Side Commons, Blue Heron Pond, many commercial properties in town as well. The project team also consists of Midwestern Consulting and J. Bradley Moore and Associates. An overview of where this is at. The site is located on the east side of Pontiac Trail, just south of DuVarn and just south of the North Side Commons development that Norfolk Development also built in 2000 to 2002 approximately. Across the street is the Pulte Development, North Sky. And to the south, immediately to the south are vacant and residential properties. And to the southwest is the Barton Green property. This property consists of two existing buildings, one light industrial, one residential. The property is zoned R4A. We did an annexation and rezoning of this property in about 2005. Over here. Okay. Tricky. About 2005, it was annexed with an area plan and rezoned. The plan is to demolish the two existing buildings and construct 69 new condominium units in 11 buildings. All work would be done in one phase. The buildings would go up in order, not all at one time, but generally in one phase. These units are the same units that are found at the Blue Heron Pond development on the west side of Ann Arbor. As I understand, somebody lives there on this. No? Someone told me that somebody on the planning commission, maybe someone in city council, lives in Blue Heron Pond. But, okay. Anyway, at the corner of Maple and Liberty, Blue Heron Pond, which has been a very successful development. Norfolk took it over. It was a product of failure during the recession. One building was built and they resite planned it and put these buildings on, and it's been very popular and for all intents and purposes is sold out or fully reserved at this time. So these units are going to be essentially the same buildings that have been built over Blue Heron Pond. The site is zoned R4A, as I said, and conforms to all the requirements associated with setbacks, height, open space, lot area, and bicycle parking. A variance is being sought for automobile parking. Currently, 69 under-unit spaces and 25 surface spaces are recognized by code on this site plan, which is short of the ordinance by 44 spaces. However, 34 under-unit spaces exist in the form of a tandem space, one in front of the other, hidden from public and not creating any new impervious surface. And 69 other regulation-sized surfaces exist in the driveways that are in front of the garages of each unit. And they're full-size spaces. There's at least 20 feet there, so they can park in front of their garage door without being out in the aisle or anything, and without creating any additional impervious surface. The code doesn't recognize these as legal spaces, so we are seeking a variance for those. On the north side of the property and the south side is a heavily landscaped conflicting land use buffer, as well as existing mature trees that will remain. We are dedicating an additional 17 feet of right-of-way on the east side of Pontiac Trail. And traffic, we probably will get into a back and forth discussion about traffic. But in general, this is a relatively small development. At 69 units, it doesn't generate enough traffic to warrant a full-blown traffic impact study. We performed provided a traffic impact statement to the city traffic engineers, which they accepted. The impact shows very little impact on existing intersections, less than 1% increase at the nearest intersection of Barton and Pontiac Trail. And we could talk about that more. I'm sure there'll be discussion on that because Pontiac Trail obviously has a traffic issue, and I'm sure there's many residents here that are here to speak about that. Brad, do you want to talk about architecture for a minute here?
Yeah, so the buildings are organized with parking tucked below the living space, so we minimize the amount of parking at surface, thus reducing the amount of impervious area. The entrances to the units are generally at a mid-level between the parking level and the first living level. So there's a parking level that's a kind of a pedestal in each building, followed by 2 full floors of living space. And then we have an occupied attic in the gable of the unit that is an option that people can purchase and finish off if that's what they decide to do. So these are some of the 2-dimensional drawings that were submitted with submittal to planning staff. So you can see they each have a garage door. There's a half a flight up to the entry, and then once you get inside the entry, there's another half a level up to the first floor. Some of the units on the site, because of the topography, will have the opportunity for a walkout basement level. Again, that'll be finished at the purchaser's request. The exterior siding materials will be the same as on Blue Heron. There'll be a mixture of brick and siding. There are outdoor decks for each dwelling, so they have a private outdoor living space. They can put outdoor patio, barbecue grills, play structures for the kids, whatever they want. So this is another type of unit. This accentuates the internal circulation of the stair in a cross gable to the main ridge. Some of the buildings, because of the topography, step down the hill, so that rather than one continuous ridge line, it's segmented or stepped ridge line. And then we're back to the...
Okay, so now all the fun stuff comes. Water main. We have a water main network that connects to Northside Commons on the north, extends through to the south, leaving a stub for any future development to the south, as well as connecting to Pontiac Trail and stubbing out to what is known as the Brewer property to the east, in case of that development. The sanitary sewer, we take sanitary sewer from a stub that was purposely left there in 2001 to serve this property because my clients owned it at that time when they developed Northside Commons. And so we bring that sanitary sewer through the development and down, also stubbing to the south for future development there. Stormwater management, we have 2 ponds on this site. There's a lot of topography. You'll see a grading plan shortly. The site basically, through the middle, is a humpback, and it drains east and west from there. We have great infiltration in some of the ponds, so we don't even have to have an outlet in one pond. It's all like very coarse, clean sand, and so it'll recharge the groundwater. And this is the grading plan, which is presented a lot of challenges when you're dealing with like a denser development and a lot of topography. But it's very interesting, and it will definitely not look plain. We are very happy with the project. I think we feel this is a very good project for the area. Our petitioner, our client, has provided an efficient, compact design that minimizes the impacts to natural features and removes no landmark trees. There are 103 under-unit parking spaces in total that provide no exterior impervious surface, and we are proposing to utilize driveway parking to minimize additional impervious surfaces to further reduce runoff. We're also utilizing infiltration to enhance the groundwater recharge, and we are very happy with what we've presented to you tonight and here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Mr. Chang for the staff report.
Well, yeah, I believe the petitioner did a very good job of explaining the project. I would only add that if this is approved tonight, that it would move on to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the variance later this month, and the approval is also conditioned upon combining the 3 lots before permits would be issued.
Thank you. We will now open up the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? Those who wish to address the Planning Commission, you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. Please step up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Vince Crusoe, 556 Glendale Circle. I'm here representing Allen's Creek Watershed Group, coordinating member for the Allen's Creek Watershed Group, also a board member of the Coalition for Remediation of Dioxin, the CARD group. I have 2 points I'd like to make. One is I'd like to see these developments consider using porous pavement. We've had the city do a couple projects in porous. The university did a porous lot down on Fuller, and they're infiltrating 1,300 inches of water an hour. That's like many, many hurricanes at once, going down Fuller Road. It's reduce the heat island. It will detoxify the contaminants on the hard surfaces. Much less slip and fall. The snow melts readily. 2 inches of snowfall generally will melt away before the plows arrive. Very little salt is required. Actually cheaper than regular pavement. Minnesota is looking at porous highways, saying they're going to save 30% of their construction costs using porous on their highways. I think we'll find the same in Ann Arbor. I think the potential for porous pavement is great on these kind of projects where you don't have a lot of heavy traffic, but where you have roadways, the Watershed Group is proposing porous pavement for all these reasons. Plus, porous pavement is very quiet, and now we are pretty clear that noise in cities is very stressful for residents. I live off Liberty Street, like another member here of the board. It's very noisy, and we could reduce the noise tremendously with porous roadways. So I think we need to look at that as an opportunity. The other thing I wanted to bring up is Council Member Jane Lum made a point to me last year that I've been talking about, and others have been talking about, the Greenbelt. And when the Greenbelt was voted on and passed by the city, 33% of the green space was supposed to be purchased in the city. Last year, she told me that her calculation showed only 9% was spent in the city. And since its inception, it's only been 21%. So I think we need to live up to the vote that the people made, and that we need to look at some of these green spaces, this one in particular and others in this area that are ripe supposedly for development. We need to keep some green space in the city. Green space is tremendously important. We saw that with the vote on the library lot. Tremendous support for green space in the downtown. And we have a millage, we have the money. We should be spending it in the city. Even New York City, with all of its density, has green space pretty regularly spaced around in the city. And the Central Park is a very popular area to go to because people want to get away from all the hard space and get into some green space. I think it's very uplifting in the people's moods. U of M did their own study showing that green space, walking in green space is probably better than antidepressants without side effects. So we need this green space. We passed the millage. I think we need to start looking at city council and the planning commissioners and others to support preserving green space in the city, and that we shouldn't be looking at all these spaces for development, because green space provides great opportunities. If we want to infiltrate stormwater, we want to reduce heat island, and so I think we need to change our attitude on that. I think we're way too interested in developing all the green space in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address the Planning Commission in regards to the Bristol Ridge condos?
It's the latter part of what you said.
Anyone else wishing to address the Planning Commission in regards to this agenda item?
Yes. Bristol Ridge, yes. Hi, I'm Sandy Wylie. I live at 2920 North Knightsbridge, which is it's North Side Ridge, so it's not the immediate condo association north of this property, but it's the next one, the one that borders on Duvarin. I have some concerns about the number of developments that are happening right there along Pontiac Trail and the density of them. I appreciate the mention of the need for green space. There is Olson Park, but it's not that accessible to this kind of a property, to the ones across the street. If you have young children, it's a little bit dangerous to cross Pontiac Trail and then to cross Duvarin. It's not that accessible for younger families. I'm also concerned about how this will look when you're driving down Pontiac Trail. I'm not right now where it looks like that first building is on the north. I'm not sure if that's roughly equivalent to where the house is now, but it's on quite a sizable hill, and I'm wondering how much of that hill will be destroyed to put this in. You mentioned, I haven't seen the elevation map to understand that, but that's a concern of mine, that we not totally destroy the topography that's there if it is developed, because I think that's part of the beauty of going up and down the hills and dales there on Pontiac Trail. And when you look out now for what has happened on the other side of Pontiac Trail, it's been very flattened, and it's really made it a lot uglier. And that development, the houses are right next to each other. There's no green space at all in that. So when you step back and you look at this in a bigger area, it's very highly, it's very densely developed just in that area. But my concerns are having it fit within the topography. That's my main concern. And then figuring out how to manage the traffic in that area. Because this particular one may not add a lot of traffic, but all the ones around it, they are already adding a lot of traffic. And we're locked in there. Duvarin goes between Nixon and Pontiac Trail. Those are your only two options, Nixon and Pontiac Trail, and it's a couple of mile length there, and there are a lot of new developments that are going in there, and then they're coming out on Pontiac Trail. It's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. That's pretty fast for this dense of development. So I'd really like the planning committee to step back and look at how this fits in with the rest of that corner of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this agenda item? All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the Bristol Ridge Townhome Site Plan and Development Agreement conditioned upon combining the lots and ZBA approval. Do I have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandel. We are in discussion. Commissioner Gibrandel.
In regard to the last comment about pedestrian connections, could you describe just the context for us? I know there's a bunch of new developments happening across the road, but will this, obviously the site now, I'm sure, does not have an existing sidewalk, maybe it does. Is there a pedestrian connection between this site and Olson Park to the north? I know that there are pedestrian crossings at the roundabout. Sorry, yeah. Could you hear me?
Yes, now I
Okay.
can.
Sorry.
Yeah, we will be providing sidewalk across the frontage of this site that will connect to the sidewalk that's off the frontage of Northside Commons. And that goes also down Duvarn.
Okay.
And I don't think there is a dedicated crossing, like any kind of a specific.
At the
At Olson
roundabout?
Park? I don't believe so. No,
There's no roundabout here.
no,
Okay.
no. So you can walk the sidewalk up and get to there and cross the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mills.
Thanks. A couple questions for the developer. One is the color photos that are here, I'm guessing, what I see from the elevations at least, have the garage's entrance in the front rather than in the rear like this. Is that right? Just that I'm looking at that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are from the existing one. There will be a garage door below, or multiple garage doors below all of those living room windows or whatever that is. Okay, got it. Can you also walk us through the grading plan, just because it was great that you had a map, but we're not used to reading those, and there is a lot of topography here, so tell us what you're doing. Like, how much leveling are you actually doing?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There is a
By there's a crosswalk into Olson Park.
There is,
Yeah.
okay.
striped on the page.
Brad, did you take a look? I saw you looking at the grading. The hill that was referenced is right up in this area here.
You had a grading plan on your
Yeah.
presentation.
There it is. And it looks like we are probably taking about 8 feet off the top of that hill. It's a sharp, pronounced knoll. I mean, it's not a big, gentle thing. I mean, it's a ridge. So at the highest point, we're taking about 8 feet off of the top of it.
But that is one of the buildings that, as you enter off of Pontiac Trail, and then you make that right-hand turn and you head back to the rear units, that first building there that overlooks their detention pond is one of the buildings that steps down with the topography. So we're using the topography to minimize the height of the building because it goes with the land. So that is a descending driveway as you come in off Pontiac Trail and go to the back of the property.
How, presumably, can you walk us through, like, if I drive in this and I'm going around your figure 6 there, how, is that all level, or am I going up and down? I understand that the buildings, are kind of maybe
Okay.
falling a bit, but what's going on with, like, the parking lot and drive?
So what you do when you come if you come in off of the drive, you're going up. And then you will rise up as you follow my cursor around this point. Then that's the high point if you were to continue to the east. You're falling down to the east now. If you were to go north, you're rising up. You're rising up about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feet from this intersection of the drives up to here. You guys can see my cursor, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. And then from here, you are going down. You're going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 feet to this dumpster enclosure. So right through here is the high point of the existing topography. It's quite severe, actually. I mean, it's so severe, it almost looks like it was man-made because it just drops off when you get halfway through the site and it just falls off. And there's no development on the back side here. The existing buildings are all on the front side before that drop-off.
So you're shaving, I mean, in order to get through there, to level it, you're shaving that. I'm just trying to understand, like, how much dirt you're moving.
Right.
Effectively.
We're shaving 8 feet off the top here at the north property line, almost nothing down at the south end where my cursor is right now.
Yeah. And
So-
then I thought right through the middle of the site, you were suggesting that there was a very sharp ridge. Are you not?
Right through here,
Yeah.
it's a ridge that falls from west to east.
Yep. So you're having to move something.
Yeah, and in general, like this whole area here is being graded, and as much as 8 feet at the north end is being taken off, and it's being moved around the site a little
Yep.
bit. But for instance, this big long building up here, where my cursor is right now, that's at grade, like pretty much within a foot or two of existing grade. So it's just that over in this area where my cursor is just a sharp razorback.
Got it.
Yeah, it's not a flat site.
Got it. So, I mean, we can't expect a lot of earth moving in order to make this development work, right? Like,
Right. I mean, it is, but it's not. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a 7-acre site, so it's really not a lot of earth. I mean, it's just, it's some radical little terrain.
got it. All right. Thank you. I'm sure that there will be questions about traffic, so I'm not going to ask about that. But I just want to make the comment that what I like about this is that they are asking for a variance for less parking. And the idea of being able to use driveways to piggyback, I mean, that's how many of us park, if we have a driveway anyway. That seems like something that we should just allow. This is like kind of note to self, maybe this will come back at the commission proposed business. And I appreciate that rather than meet our code and overpark the site, that you're going through the effort of asking for the variance. Clearly, that's not something that we can grant, but I think it's wise and warranted. This is a situation where I think there appears that there's plenty, if you park in your driveway, plenty of parking here. There's also guest parking, because I know that's a consideration throughout the site. So I really appreciate that. I think that this is one where we are helping to protect, or we are limiting disturbance of natural features to the minimum necessary. And so I really like that approach.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similarly, I appreciate the approach to the parking, any ways in which we can reduce the amount of impervious surface, the better it is for neighboring properties, for water quality and quantity. I had a question. In reviewing the notes from the citizen participation meeting, one question stood out to me, and that was the history of the site. There was reference to a dump that previously there had been dumping occurring on the site. And the answer says Sean attempted to show on aerial on his laptop. And unfortunately, that doesn't translate very well into writing. I was wondering if someone could discuss the history of the site.
Yeah, assume you're talking about the dump that's on the neighboring property. Yeah, it's not on this property.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get back out. I'm very familiar with it because I've investigated it years ago and multiple times. Let's see if we can go out. That was good. Okay, it's on the big one, not the blow up one, the site. The dump is way over here.
Oh, across Pontiac Trail.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I know what they're referencing.
Well, it's south of Devarn. It's in the Brewer property. It's behind the Chinese Christian church.
Not the.
Yeah. Use the big
Understood.
scale photo,
Yep.
not like the blow up one. Yeah, it's not on this property.
Could you try one slide forward?
So it's over here.
Got it. All right.
Right there.
Thank you.
It's like, yeah, it's not on this site.
Okay. Okay, and then have you guys done any testing on site to ensure your soil levels are safe?
Yeah. Phase one. Back in 2005.
You can
speak
step
into
up to the podium.
Just for the record and for the people watching at home, all 3 or 4 of them.
Yes, we've done a phase one environmental on it, and everything's clean there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then I think it's probably a good time to dive into traffic. Our memo internally kind of said that the scope of this project doesn't trigger a full-blown traffic review, so I was hoping if you could discuss a little bit about the traffic impact produced by the site.
Yeah, we issued a traffic impact statement to city traffic staff who accepted it. We determined what the peak hour trip generation would be and which direction they would be going, and that's all that's required for a development of this size. I knew there would be questions about it, about traffic, because Pontiac Trails obviously has some issues with traffic. And so I went a little bit further, and I brought you some numbers just so you understand the magnitude of what impact this development will have on Pontiac Trail. So we calculated that with the 69 units, there would be 34 peak hour trips leaving the site in the morning, and there would be 42 peak hour trips entering the site in the afternoon. I'm sorry, it's not just entering, it's going both ways. There's 34 total trips, 8 entering, 26 exiting in the morning. And in the afternoon, there's a total of 42, with 26 entering, coming home, and 16 going out, presumably to grocery shop or go to dinner. The distribution generally in this area is regarded as about 80% of the people will be heading south towards Barton Drive area intersection and eventually to Plymouth Road, with 20% going north and probably either continuing north or turning most likely onto Devarn Road to go over to Nixon and down to the retail developments that are there. So using those numbers, we would have 27 trips in the morning going down to the problem intersection of Barton and Pontiac Trail, and in the afternoon, 34 trips coming through that very same intersection, which is the problem intersection. Currently, the combined total of morning and afternoon trips through that intersection is 3,658. Our total would add 61 trips through that intersection, both combined morning and afternoon trips, which is less than a 1% increase through that intersection. So it's probably not measurable, I guess is my point. So.
Thanks. While we're on the subject of traffic, and I understand, this is a drop into a much, deeper bucket in terms of total trips. The safety of your entrance exit, is it mid-site? Can you talk a little bit about the sightline distances and anything you took into account to ensure safety?
We originally, our original submittal, if you looked on Track It, actually did not make the site distance as we learned, as we evaluated it again. So we moved the entrance further south. There's a hill to the north that obstructs view. So we moved it to the south to conform to the letter of the law. Now, the letter of the law is a two-component issue for site distance. There's what's called intersection site distance and stopping site distance. Stopping site distance is the distance that it takes you to react when you see something, to hit the brake, and your car to stop at a given speed. And these distances change with every 5-mile-an-hour increment. So that's the distance it takes you to see. If a ball came out in front of you, that's how long it takes you to recognize there's a ball there, I got to do something, I hit the brakes, my car stops. That is a smaller distance than intersection site distance. Intersection site distance is what we conform to. Intersection site distance is that distance that I just described and the distance that it takes you pulling out of the driveway to accelerate to the design speed of the road so that if a car was coming up, they don't have to put on the brakes. If you understand that? Mm-hmm. So they don't have to slow down. You pull out in a normal situation and you're up to speed so they don't have to slow down. So that distance is a larger distance. That's what we conform to, and that's what's required. So,
what was the impact to your site? And so did you were moving your driveway south, I assume?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't much. Basically, see this stub right here?
Mm-hmm.
That's where the driveway was. It curled out and hit the road right there.
Oh, understood. Okay.
Yeah, that's what happened. It just had a simple driveway that came out and curled around and came up to Pontiac Trail there. When we realized it didn't mix, we just put it down here and came up, and you get some parking this way and you turn this way to go into the site.
Okay. While we're on the topic of vehicle circulation, can you discuss single point of entry exit with respect to fire?
The fire department reviewed this and approved it. We actually made a lot of changes for the fire department. This development was a little bit more elongated. And for instance, we had development all the way out to here, but it was a dead end. And maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, but the fire department has a requirement that they can't go down a dead end more than 150 feet. So we can't have a dead end that comes down here. So that kind of compacted it as well. But as far as circulation goes, nobody's expressed any concern about the circulation patterns or the single point of entry. Anytime you've got private drives and aisles, having connectivity becomes an issue, because then there's an issue about who's going to pay for cross-traffic maintenance and wear and tear, that sort of thing, so.
I was just going to mention that Commissioner Woods was on this board when we were processing a site plan on Ann Arbor Saline Road, where the fire marshal was asking for a 2-point connection, even though the project was below the 100-unit count, which was the threshold. We had about 75 units. And it was eventually determined that based on neighborhood concerns, we removed that second point of entry. So as long as you're under that 100-unit threshold, it's really not an issue.
Thank you. Yeah, we can discuss the wisdom of, unit count being how you determine what sorts of, space and roadway fire trucks need to get in and out, but that's a conversation for another day. I think that satisfies me for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So, Mr. Caruso brought up the porous pavement, and I just wanted to see your thoughts and if that was something you'd thought about or had interest in thinking about.
To be honest, no, we really didn't think about it. I mean, we all know the issues with porous pavement and the climate that we live in. It's difficult because of the freeze-thaw. It's also only suitable for a parking lot, to be very honest with you. Because a parking lot, you can keep everybody off, construction's done. Have you guys ever gone out to a construction site at a condominium development and seen what the roads look like during construction? It's nothing but mud, which means porous pavement is no longer porous. And that's the honest truth about porous pavement. Porous pavement is porous, and then it's not porous. And there's nothing you can do about it. It will become impervious because it has pores that fill up, and you can't do anything about it. I mean, you can vacuum it and vacuum it, but sooner or later, it just doesn't become porous as much as it used to be. So a lot of porous pavement designs incorporate storm sewers because the inevitable is going to happen, and the water's not going to soak in, and you need to collect it just like you do a conventional pavement. So porous pavement has its places, but unfortunately in Michigan, it's not a very good candidate. Down south in the moderate climates, it's a lot better. But for what we have up here, and for a situation where you're going to be building homes and using the roads for access, they're just going to be covered with mud. I mean, they always are. It's just a fact of life. And so, I mean, to install porous pavement would be something you'd basically have to rip out the entire road system after you built all of your housing and then install porous pavement. Because if you've ever been out to a construction site, it's boots only, so.
I just wanted to point out, as Scott mentioned before, the porosity of the soil at our detention basin is such that all the water that is being collected by the storm sewer and deposited in the basin is all going to go into the ground anyway, as it would with the impervious basin.
Can I jump in
Commissioner
on that
Gibrandal.
topic? So I disagree about the reasons why you wouldn't use it, but I agree that it's actually not appropriate here. We've put it in several places in Ann Arbor. It's fine with the freeze thaw. The issue is that you pretty much have to do porous pavers in order to have it work because it delaminates with salt application. That's what happened to the lot that's at the library lot. So they have not done well in places where there's a lot of public traffic coming in and out because they will fail in those areas. So porous pavers are a lot more expensive than porous pavement. The thing that I feel like trumps this more than anything else, because you can clean it, you can decompact, you can take stuff out, you can make it more porous. I don't really agree with that. But for me, it's a water quality issue, because by running the stormwater into the systems that you are proposing, your water quality is going to be better than if it's through porous pavement, because you have the treatment of the plants and the organics, which actually bind up heavy metals in ways that the aggregate alone is not as effective with. So I think porous pavement is better in places that are highly urbanized, where you have very little space, you don't have the space to put a detention basin, and you have good soils. You have good soils here, but they have room here to be able to put their detention basins. So, and they're gonna infiltrate 10 inches an hour, I think is what, that's great, especially around here. So I feel like it's kind of like a nice nod to doing something green, but they're actually dealing very well with the stormwater that will be coming off of those by treating it in a living system that has living soils and bacteria and microbiota that will be helping to deal with the pollutants in ways that the plain old aggregate underneath the porous pavement system would not address. It's better than nothing, like in a downtown space, but here they actually are going to end up with better water quality with the system that they're proposing than with doing porous pavement. So that's my opinion. I think we differ on some of the strategies and the climate things, whatever. In the end, I feel like this is probably a better system for this site than porous pavement would be. As long as they're not taking down a whole woods to put in there. And from what I see, it looks like the quality woodland is on the far west of the site, and you're keeping you're doing very little grading, over on that side of the site. So that's what I would say about the stormwater porous pavement piece.
Commissioner Woods.
Just a couple of questions. One is about the slope of the entrance drive as it's going out onto Pontiac Trail. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because as you've talked about the elevation of the site, and I'm thinking about coming out of the site and making sure that you have enough space to stop, and whether or not, what is that like?
Yeah, it's a slight hill going down. I mean, we kept it within the city's guidelines, which is less than 6%, and it does level out at the bottom. But at the end of the day, it isn't a flat site, and making it flatter, making the entrance flatter, would require more soil removal of the knoll that I spoke about, like through the center of the site. So, I mean, yeah, it's not flat, I agree.
Okay.
But-
Is that a point where you might want to think about some other kind of pavement or something sort of with, I don't know, ridges or something that sort of would help with the stop quality or stopping?
I think they're probably just going to have to be mindful of it and keep it clean. Ridges, aberrations to pavement wreak havoc on snow plows. And then snow plowers' fillings as well when they hit them. And so generally they haven't been very widely accepted. And then they tend to fill in with water and become then ice. So I think there's a concern. I mean, the residents there are going to have to be careful because it's not a flat site. But Ann Arbor has a lot of hills and areas that people just learn to deal with. Unfortunately, nothing is a perfect condition.
They may have to put up some sign that says road gets icy.
They might just put up a barrel of sand where people we've seen that around where people like sprinkle some sand out there. So.
Yeah. The other question I was curious about is you've indicated where your dumpsters are going to be. So will the residents be going and dumping their own refuse, or will they have, or will it be that they'll sit out their compostable and their recycle bins and all those kinds of things on trash day?
I think the intent is to use the dumpsters as a central location.
Yeah, this is, according to the city staff, this is too many units for people to have individual carts.
Oh, really?
And that was also the case at Blue Heron. So we have corrals, periodically through development that have both a recycle and a trash container, and they're people walk their trash over and put it in, or they walk the recyclables over.
Okay. So then are those serviced by private companies or the city, or do you know?
It's through the city's contract waste hauler, waste management.
Okay. All righty. I was just curious about the stopping distance and everything, but I assume you've already checked all that out, so you won't have any difficulty with that. Okay. Okay, I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Commissioner Trudeau.
I took a look at the master plan land use element for this area. There's a bunch of specific notes about this particular area, including the adjacent brewer property behind this and some of the other undeveloped pieces here. I just wanted to highlight the plan does call for 7 to 10 units per acre of density, and this is 69 on 7 acres, so it comes in under 10. So I just wanted to note that this is what we have planned for in that document through that process. So this shouldn't be a surprise. One of the other things, well, I'll also observe the landfill is very clearly mentioned on the adjacent property, so that will be something we'll all be well aware of if and when that property comes up for development. Another thing that this area specifically mentions is that if these parcels are developed separately and not combined as a single development, that they should be interconnected with pedestrian and roadway connections. That's something the master plan says in a few areas, and it's not something we typically do or typically sort of enforce. But I'm wondering what the potential is, or whether that has come up during the course of planning this for stub connections of various kinds or plans to potentially connect to the future development around it or the development to the north.
There isn't any plans to connect this development to any of the other developments. To the east is the brewer property, and through that is the woodland that we're basically protecting, and so we're not anticipating a connection through there. To the south is such a small parcel of land that's mostly consumed by wetland that there's really no value to provide that. Those properties down there are most likely someday just going to be a connection from Pontiac Trail to the brewer property, because they're choked off by a wetland and basically undevelopable. I think there's 4 2-acre properties that are south of us, and the front, 2 of them are almost entirely consumed with a wetland and only leave room for a road to go into the brewer property. So there really didn't seem to be any real benefit of connectivity in this particular case. So
The larger parcel to the north, also developed by Norfolk, does have a stub to the brewer property, so that is possible to connect.
And the only other point I just wanted to make, it's not a question, but on the unit density, to sort of reinforce Commissioner Mills' point that I do appreciate that the development is kept off a significant portion of this property on the east side, and as also Commissioner Gibrandal pointed out, where the higher quality woodland is located, and so that is, I think, a benefit of this particular layout and design, where it's meeting the master plan, but it's preserving a whole lot of open space that it wouldn't be required with a different layout.
Commissioner Sauvé.
So I appreciate all of the comments from the commissioners, especially when we talk about parking, the reduction of parking. I think I support that, and what it also does is it reduces traffic, would be the next assumption. So one thing leads to the other, I think, in a productive way to solve 2 problems at once. I have just a couple, I think, smaller questions to the overall development. One is lighting. There's, the lighting that doesn't have, that doesn't trespass beyond the boundaries, but is there anything in the condo agreement about lighting on buildings and what those might be to the residents and the property owners to make sure that outdoor lighting isn't mounted to trespass beyond the property lines?
I can't answer that. I know that the pedestal pole-mounted lighting conforms to the city ordinance without allowing trespass of lighting outside. But can you tell us, are there going to, there have to be coach lights outside of doors, I think by code, for safety reason, correct?
Correct.
But those are only activated at the demand of the homeowner occupant. And so generally, they're not taken into account in the photometric plan. There's nothing that's going to be on that's programmed to be on a sensor or anything like that. So I don't anticipate that there'd be any huge amount of lighting.
Well, and there's porch coverings at the porch where those lights would be. I guess I'm more concerned, like, if these become condos for sale and somebody opts to put outdoor lighting on their back porch and they're at the edge of the development, what kind of terms in the condo agreement regulate that to make sure that it's still compliant to the site and trespassing?
A lot, to be honest. Like, it's hard to do something in a condominium that isn't consistent with the ownership documents. Have you encountered anything at Blue Heron Pond or any other condo developments?
You know, we've never really, I guess, encountered putting additional lighting on the back of units. You know, as Scott mentioned, by code, you have to have a light outside the door, but they're typically just a coach light that lights up the deck. You know, I can honestly say we've never had anybody, quite honestly, I don't even know, without tearing into the drywall and put any additional lighting on there. So it's, it's just a coach light outside the.
Okay, I would just recommend, like, if it's not in there specifically in your condo agreement, to make sure that it follows that, so we just don't have that trespass. And then.
If I could just add on to that, as part of a site plan review project, this site would ultimately have to continue to comply with the lighting standards. So even though they're not reflected on the photometric study, it would still be required to meet the light trespass maximum levels at the property lines that the ordinance identifies.
Great. I think the other thing to that is that there's been a lot of discussion with the commission about dark sky compliance. So if we tip one step further to what that lighting compliance is, making sure all lights are dark sky compliant. So beyond the property line for zoning that is required, that we also say that it doesn't shed upward.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much done that, and it seems like all our developments nowadays are all the dark sky lights.
Just want to make note, put it on the record. And then my other question, I think it's part of my duty here, is what it seems is, let's talk about HVAC and air conditioners and their units and where they're situated on site inside the buildings.
Well, depending on the building, they will typically be on the far end of each building. So I guess looking at the site plan there, on the grading, they'll either wind up on, one of the long ends of the building. I'm not sure exactly what side each one will be on, but.
Are they behind each unit?
Are they tucking
They
under
will be all on one.
They'd be like, for instance, like this building right here, they would be like all on that?
Yes.
on the short end?
All the short end
Okay.
of the building.
Where like the gas meters and things are
That's
as
correct.
well? Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got the gas meters on the elevations, but we don't have any of the
Okay.
outdoor.
Yes, they're on the short ends of the building.
Can we get, I'm just looking at a couple of them, especially on the north end, and if they're meeting right up to the landscaping that's there, or if they're going to be in between those buildings, and if you have any.
We'll stay out of the landscaping.
Okay.
I guess we could put a note on the side yeah, I mean, they'll be out of the landscaping and out of the setbacks
Okay.
there.
And then, I think my last kind of like minute detail thing is, for the traffic study, is that based on occupancy, the parking requirements, or the parking proposed that you have on the site? When we talk about the 34 peak in the AM, 42 peak in the PM?
It's based on the number of units.
Okay.
And there's, I don't know what the trip generation is for a condominium unit, but I would suggest it's probably 6 or 7 trips per day, and they have a formula that says how many people live in this type of they take a demographic of what type of person lives in a development like this, and how many are going to be leaving in the morning at a certain time and coming home. There's single-family residential areas operate differently from a trip generation standpoint than apartment buildings do, and then condominiums do as well, and senior citizens' homes. There's literally there's 150 different categories that you can choose when you have a development, and to look at what the trip distribution and the predicted number of peak hour trips in the morning or afternoon are. And those are all based on empirical studies and a little bit of voodoo too. So.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that when we're talking about the reduced parking counts and then the impact of traffic, what we're comparing with those study numbers
Yeah,
versus
it
kind
had
of the
nothing to do
analysis,
with the
so-
number of spaces. I mean, we could have one space per unit, and the trip generation and peak hour generation would be exactly the same. It's just the unit.
Yep.
So, and the type of unit that it is. So.
Perfect. All right, thank you. I think that's it.
I have Commissioner Woods.
Just one last thing, and I'm not sure who gets credit for this, whether it's the staff or the developer, but as you were going through the slides, and we could see the site layout, and then you had the green and the red lines indicating sewer lines and those kinds of things. That was very helpful. So, thank you. I don't know.
That comes from a 23-year-old EIT who knows PowerPoint better than I do.
Okay. Well, keep her.
I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. And I like the contours, too. We've never done that before. Having a grading plan with the contours was very nice, I thought.
Yeah.
So I'll tell Jonathan you liked it.
Perfect. I have a question in regards to construction. So you noted that condo construction is not easy. It's very muddy and inconvenient. Can you talk a little about where construction would begin and what the plan is for construction?
Sure, that's, like I said, this isn't the easiest site in the world to construct, so essentially we'll be probably starting with this building here. So we'll kind of work our way around, and this first building up front, units 1 through 4, essentially we'll probably make we will make a temporary construction access point. So the hope is we will continue to build, residential traffic will come in, go to the right, construction will go to the left. We'll just kind of come in and chase ourselves out of it. So the first building here, 1 through 4, will actually be the last building that we build, because from a construction standpoint, we'll make a loop there to keep as much traffic out of the residents' side as possible.
Right. And then real estate question, what's your price point?
There's a crystal ball. We're hoping to be in the low to mid 4s. You know, our Blue Heron product right now is right about the same price point, and it seems to fit the market very well there.
Thank you. Further discussion? Commissioner Ackerman? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It looks like we are ready for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Moving on to item 9B, which is in regards to the rezoning of 7 parcels at 606 through 628 South Ashley Street from C2B Business Service to R2A two-family dwelling. We will begin with a staff report.
If I could just jump in, both these next petitions, as a reminder, in addition to what Commissioner Milstein just referenced, these were 2 city council-initiated rezonings. So city council directed both the city administrator as my ultimate boss and you as the planning commission to consider these. So we've split them up, and those will compromise these next 2 agenda items.
Mr. Khan.
Thank you. I'd like to present a staff report, and I do have a few slides to show afterward. Most of the buildings on the west side of this block were built in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and by this block I mean the west side of the 600 block of South Ashley Street between Mosley and Madison. The Ackerman Cleaner Building was built in the middle of the 20th century. Commercial uses exist on the northernmost property, which is the Washtenaw Dairy, and the southernmost property, Ackerman Cleaners. The Central Area Plan recommended that the 7 parcels in the middle of the block, not the parcels with the commercial uses in the north or south ends of the parcels, be rezoned from C2B to residential zoning to encourage residential use and character. The block is within the Old West Side Historic District. On September 4th, 2018, City Council directed staff to study portions of the west side of the 600 block of South Ashley for a possible rezoning from C2B to R2A, which is a two-family dwelling district. The study area generally corresponds to an area called out in the City of Ann Arbor Master Plan land use element where the zoning designation, quote, should be changed to protect the existing lower density development, unquote. There are 7 lots in the study area. All but one are non-conforming lots having less than 4,000 square feet of lot area. Staff conducted an analysis of the proposed rezoning and is recommending that the zoning remain C2B. The staff report provides information on the soil contamination issue. It provides some analysis regarding the rezoning and discusses some of the pros and cons of each zoning district. C2B has the potential to incentivize redevelopment and therefore brownfield cleanup more than the R2A. R2A zoning is not, in staff's opinion, dense enough to incentivize redevelopment of the site, which would include brownfield cleanup. Downzoning to R2A would decrease the likelihood of a brownfield cleanup. The historic district currently discourages any type of redevelopment. Any redevelopment would need to be sensitive to maintaining historic character and scale. Staff recommends keeping the C2B zoning in place for the entire block to provide an opportunity for future site cleanup. Staff recommends denial of the proposed rezoning of 7 lots from C2B to R2A because it reduces the likelihood of remediating contaminated soils, would create a nonconformity related to use, and would result in the parcels becoming more nonconforming with regard to lot size. I do have a few slides that I brought with me. I don't know how clear they are. This first slide illustrates what the current zoning situation looks like. C2B exists throughout the portion of the site. The yellow area illustrates the 7 lots that are in question. This is the proposed rezoning, which would leave the commercial uses at the north end and the south end as C2B, but would convert the 7 parcels in the middle to R2A. This is an aerial view of the study area. 618 South Main is just to the east, and just on the other side of 618 is the new residential complex called The Yard. And this is a zoom aerial image of the study area. And that's my presentation.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open up a public hearing on this item. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to these 7 parcels from 606 to 628 South Ashley, please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, my name is Odile Huguenot-Heber, and I live on 531 3rd. I was not sure why the rezoning was going to occur. I had a feeling that people maybe wanted to redevelop this site and make another big building there. And I feel we just had very big building on each side of South Main Street, and that we didn't need another big building there, and it would start to encroach into the whole west side. So I came to kind of listen and to learn why this rezoning was occurring. It seems that you would not recommend that it would be developed. That's what I understood from the presentation. Is that true?
So we'll discuss that during our discussion.
Okay, well, I would like to hear more so I can speak to my neighbors who are kind of worried about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Vince Crusoe again, 556 Glendale Circle. I would like to urge you to support City Council's vote on this. I think we have seen a change in our city from density at all costs to more reasoned approach. We're looking at affordable housing potentially. These sites have affordable housing in them, I would say, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of renters in there. I think we need to step back and look at what happened to some of these cities that have very high buildings, have canyons. For example, in Manhattan, New York, people are living in very squalid apartments because they're trying to get sun. And so they have a sun map now that you can go online and check how much sun your apartment that you propose renting, how much sun you'll get different parts of the year. So now people are spending large amounts of money to get a very marginal apartment that has some sun because there's so little sun with all the tall buildings. And I think, you know, we are getting a canyon effect in Ann Arbor. I think that that's unfortunate. I think the residents in this area would like to maintain a more customary neighborhood that they've, you know, lived in for years. I don't know that we need to develop out every community, every neighborhood that is close to Main Street. They have a large building there now already. I think we're finding that an MIT study showed that high density doesn't necessarily and generally doesn't reduce prices. It actually increases prices, reduces affordable housing. We end up with more cars. You look at the Old West Side is subsidizing these developers by allowing cars to be parked in their streets because a lot of these condos have multiple cars. They don't have one car, they have 2 cars per person in some cases because they're wealthy people. And there's more driving. And then when we build these expensive condominiums, we're displacing middle-income people. So I think we need to maintain diversity in the city and not design our cities so that the university can have expensive condos for their out-of-country students to come and live. That will not last forever. We need to decide how these apartments will be used in the future. A 6-bedroom apartment is not going to be amenable to anybody. I think we're making mistakes in that regard as well. So I would hope you support City Council and their vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Jeff Benko, 213 West Madison, just next door to the Washtenaw Dairy. Let's see, I spoke with Jeff Cahan earlier today, or he responded to some questions, which I appreciate. It was very helpful in trying to fully understand what's going on. Read the report several times, and I think in general there's a little bit of confusion just as far as where that is, and I hope you can address maybe some of the points, you know, part of it being the denial against the master plan, and then also some of the scenarios of redevelopment, both with the different zoning options, was kind of mixed together, and it was a little bit tough from a lay person to understand what could be going in on those different elements. Basically, though, I'd like to just echo the concern just as far as how to preserve the existing character of that, of the area there. As I said, we've had a lot of recent development in there, and still having that, you know, what mechanisms can preserve that existing character when continuing to be zone C2B. Obviously, it's not a change in the status quo, it's a continuation. But, you know, in the report, it's mentioning 30 to 40 units, 4 stories tall, potentially, you know, that fits in the general code. But again, you know, if you guys could just, you know, it seemed to me like we're trying to put that both, leave it as C2B, you know, for potentially clean up the environment, but it wasn't really apparent to me why a developer would then go in and redevelop it with that additional cost in. Maybe all those mechanisms are leaving to kind of a status quo in that area, but you know, it was just, like I said, you know, if you can comment on the you know, how do we make sure that the existing character can be preserved in that area? I appreciate it. In general, I think Jeff, the discussions with Jeff helped me become fairly, you know, can see the agreement or see the reasoning why the City Council or the Planning Commission is reaching that, but just, I think, you know, that additional discussion was needed in order to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lucy Miller. I live at 319 West Mosley, where Second ends at West Mosley. So I've lived very close to this for a long time and also spoke with Jeff today. I guess what I would just want to augment what this gentleman was saying, because I think most people don't, I mean, this has been C2B for a long time. I would say most people don't know what that means. And so I would want you to think in terms of if tomorrow something showed up that allows that, what people would think, because there is a lot of encroachment. We're not altogether happy with what's happening on Main Street. There's not a lot of diversity going on along Main Street. So just to think about what people would really think when they woke up to what it meant. That's all I ask. I don't know what the right answer is. I know that site's contaminated. I've known it for a long time. I know it's very contaminated. It's kind of an unusual little small block, but just to be really thoughtful and not make a quick decision, because people don't know what you're doing. And this is the room where it happens. So I want to just be in the room where it happens.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat Martz. I live 514 South Ashley, so I'm less than a block away. My concern, twofold. It would be nice to keep it so that we have a chance for the cleanup of the perk. That's one thing. We have floodplain encroaching from the north, so it kind of complicates things. It's going to complicate things in the long run. That line is moving south. The perk is moving north. On the other hand, it's very important to me. We've had so much building going on around us. It has really, it hasn't destroyed our quality of life, but it has reduced our quality of life. They have done the demolition just this week on Jefferson and South Ashley. They're starting the crazy time of year to start the gallery, but that's what they're doing. So we are now into the noise, and then the spring and the molds will come and be allergies, and it's going to be awful. We've had all that noise. We have 618. We have a canyon. You drive down a canyon. I drive home at night down Main Street, down the canyon, which has increased traffic speed. Okay, not reduced it. They've put up 25-mile-per-hour signs, but it hasn't reduced anything. So my big concern, I would love to say leave it the way it is, because that's really where I'm inclined. I want to see those buildings stay there. But my concern with leaving it at the current zoning is redevelopment. It's a camel's nose in the tent. I don't want to see 4-story buildings there, because then First Street becomes the edge of the old west side that's being encroached on. And we're really feeling pretty beleaguered. That we have not only the gallery, we have the crazy bar going in across the street, and that's right across the street from me. Ashley Auto is becoming, that we're not even going to go there. But so that we have hammering and sanding and all sorts of stuff going on all the time. So there's a lot of construction already. Having this site potentially redeveloped, which is a possibility if we leave it at the current zoning, makes me nervous. I would want to know what the real plans are in the future if the site is left at this current zoning versus the down zoning. Is that the term you use, to move it down to R2A? Yeah. That's what I'd like to know, and I think that would make people more comfortable in general, because we feel overdone. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this? All right, see no one. I will close the public hearing, and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council rezone 7 lots on the west side of the 600 block of South Ashley between 606 to 628 South Ashley from C2B Business Service to R2A 2-family dwelling district after studying the area as directed and as recommended by the future land use chapter of the City of Ann Arbor Master Plan last land use element. Do you have a commissioner who will move this? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandal. We are in discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a little bit of background, because it seemed like there was some basics that people were looking for, and I think that would be helpful. So in September 2018, Councilmember Smith, who represents the 5th Ward on City Council, brought forward a resolution directing this body to explore a rezoning of 2 areas of the Old West Side. These 7 parcels, and then an additional 58 parcels to the south, which we'll discuss later in the evening. Speaking directly about these 7 parcels, they're currently zoned C2B, which to the woman's question, what does that mean if something happened tomorrow, right? So C2B is one of our commercial zoning districts. It allows for mixed-use development, probably a ground floor retail or office use, and then in an area like this, likely you'd see residential above it. Our zoning says that it can be up to 55 feet high or 4 stories. So if you assume 10 feet a story, it's 40 feet. You assume 15, you're hitting your maximum of the 55 feet. So it's potentially an impactful redevelopment. The intent of the resolution was to downzone it or bring it from this commercial zoning down to a residential zoning. The benefit of that, if you enjoy the character of these 7 parcels today, is kind of twofold. On the one hand, if you actually live in one of the 7 parcels, it actually frees you up to add on additions because we just have a very expensive process of adding additions if you live in a commercial zoned property. The second benefit is that it ensures that you're either having a single family home or a duplex being built. That's what the R2A zoning is, a single family home or duplex. And that was the intent of the council resolution. Now, what would be the benefits of a redevelopment, just to kind of expose that side of the conversation? As Mr. Khan, correctly pointed out, there is serious contamination here. Ackerman Cleaners was, dumping really dangerous stuff into the ground. As it turns out, all dry cleaners and gas stations for the last half century have been doing that, and we have some really serious issues surrounding a lot of our gas stations and dry cleaners today. That is moving north as water does in this area towards the watersheds, and as it heads north, it exposes other properties. The reason that we would look to the city could look to redevelopment as an opportunity to address environmental issues is through a brownfield program. The brownfield program is something established by the state and regulated by the county and the city that allows any redevelopment to essentially create a TIF district, which is a district in which the building would capture a share of its own taxes back into the property to allow them to pay off certain line items of their construction. And those line items are very strictly regulated. So it's pretty much environmental cleanup. So instead of tax dollars going into taxing authorities, it would go to cleaning up the property. And staff has identified the possibility of as much as $2 million of cleanup being necessary. So it's like a tax incentive to do the cleanup faster than you'd see it done otherwise. And it only is triggered by redevelopment. So that's one of the incentives of redevelopment, or I guess one of the benefits of a potential redevelopment. The reason that staff identified that C2B would perhaps be better than an R2A is that C2B would be more lucrative to a potential developer, and so the likelihood of a potential developer coming in sooner and prompting this brownfield process, and so prompting cleanup, could happen sooner. So a lot of trade-offs at play, and it's not easy, and there's risk in every direction that you look at this. I guess leaving it there to kind of summarize the background and why we're here. I'm grateful Councilmember Smith is having this conversation. the Old West Side is in a sensitive state where there's been a lot of change, and we have to figure out where's the transition boundary, right? Where do we transition out of a D2 or, downtown fringe district like you see at 618 into the Old West Side? And we need to make those decisions. And we need to make it easier for the immediate residents to, add additions if they want to. However, the environmental contamination is very real and scary. And private redevelopment is the best way to deal with it on private property. And that's what living in Michigan means. That's what living in the United States means. If you have a scary chemical on your neighbor's property, you better have a good neighbor to clean it up. So I guess a question to staff. In the analysis, which I'm very grateful for, and I appreciate you raising the environmental concerns, were other zoning types, so did we examine? So, this immediately was prompted by trying to change the zoning from commercial to residential. Were there other residential zoning types that were explored in this evaluation?
Staff was asked to focus on the R2A. However, we did spend a little time looking at the R4C. It would be a little island since everything to the west is R2A. R4C allows up to 20 dwelling units per acre. This site is 6/10 of an acre, so maybe you could get 12 units here, whereas the R2A could allow approximately 5 dwelling units. The R4C would more likely attract a student housing developer because you can get up to 6 bedrooms with an R4C. And so 6 bedrooms times 12 would be a lot more bedrooms. Sure. And if they're providing 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, they're really not going to be covering the number of vehicles that are likely going to be drawn to a property like that, which means I think you'd get even more folks parking in the Old West Side. So we did look at the R4C as a comparison.
Any examination of R3 or the townhouse zoning district?
The R3 allows the same kind of density, which is 10 dwelling units per acre, so you would result in a total of 6 dwelling units. As opposed to 5 in the R2A. And then you're still looking at the same sort of incentive or lack thereof as you would with the R2A. So the R3 doesn't get you much more in the way of density.
Understood. Okay.
Brett has a comment, I think.
Well, and I just don't want it to be lost. In some ways, I really apologize to the Planning Commission that we really struggled with this. As you see from our staff report, we saw both sides of this aspect. And I just want to be clear, though, by the nature of this in the Old West Side Historic District, in addition to sort of just the fundamental zoning density restrictions that may or may not apply depending on the districts, I just want to be clear, and we've not presented the prospect of any large-scale redevelopment of these homes. The Historic Preservation Ordinance's first lens is going to be protection of these resources, probably. There are some ways in which you could petition to demolish, remove, but I just want to be clear that to further box you in from our recommendation, that is another limiting factor to either R2A or C2B as to the potential. So it's even more challenging in a way. And so, and from working with Jeff and I on our analysis, based on our recommendation, we struggled with that as well, and ultimately erred on the side of, well, let's keep the door open for more opportunity on the environmental cleanup side, recognizing the challenges inherent. But again, I think as we heard comments, and I'm sure you're wrestling with, it's a really challenging convergence of circumstances here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
So kind of running down the column of C2B and R2A, and the question of compliance, and if it goes to R2A, the lot size is even more out of compliance, but the recommendation to switch to R2A was to help people with additions and things like that. So if the lot size is still out of compliance, would a property owner still have to go through the same procedures?
If a property owner on this block had a zoning district of an R2A and they wanted to build an addition, they would not need to go through the site plan process to do that. If their parcel is non-conforming with regard to lot size, which all but one is, or all but one are, they would need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is a far less cumbersome and expensive process.
But there's still a layer of process.
There's an extra layer, right?
In my understanding, we're looking at, both of these conditions have a 30-foot rear setback.
Yep.
We're looking at up to 15 feet more in height between the two, 30-foot height for R2A?
Actually, up to 25 feet more in height.
Okay.
The R2A
Oh, yeah.
allows up to 30 feet in height,
Yes.
measured to the midpoint of the pitch. And the
50.
and the C2B allows up to 4 stories or 55 feet.
Yep. Ratio of parking, we're actually looking at a ratio of parking per unit as higher for R2A.
R2A requires 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, and the C2B requires 1.
Okay. And then can you elaborate a little bit more on expectations with the historic district and any of those sorts of building requirements? So we understand if it stayed C2B, what that process would look like?
Right.
And kind of what pressures or requirements might.
Right, if it remained C2B, and I presume you mean if a developer were to come in, what would that process look like? The developer would be required to submit a site plan. We would review that site plan. We would take it before your body and then ultimately city council, but it would also go to the Historic District Commission, which is very sensitive about neighborhood scale and character. And it would be hard for me to imagine a developer coming in with something so far out of character that the Historic District Commission would say, this is completely out of character. I think an astute developer would recognize where they were, that this is in the Old West Side Historic District, and would want to come up with a development project that they felt had a good chance of success. And success, I mean success at City Council and success at the Historic District Commission. So my guess is that they might be more inclined to come in with something that looked like a row home product as opposed to a 4-story mod, fancy pants condominium complex. That's a technical term.
Fancy pants. Further discussion? Commissioner Gibrandal.
Especially for people that may not be familiar with the situation, can you explain where the toxicity is right now and just kind of the pattern of what is predicted? I know there's the generally to the north business, but just so people have a sense of what is looking red hot out there
Right.
at this moment in time, so that this is a hard thing. It's like we're basically trying to choose between neighborhood character and environmental health.
Yep.
Those are really hard. You know what I mean? Like,
Both
when it
are-
comes down to it, what
Yeah.
do we want, people, right? I mean, that's hard.
Both are big values.
Yes, and so, but having a more, or not precise, but at least some sense spatially of what you're talking about in terms of where the contamination is right now would be really
I
helpful.
can give you my sense based on my interviews with Matt Nod, but I'm going to ask Brett to join me. So my understanding is that the PERC chemical leach into the soil from the cleaners. What was very common was for cleaners throughout the last century to dump their extra PERC in their down a toilet or in a sink, and that would make its way to the sanitary lead that would go out to the street. Well, sanitary leads can be compromised. Maybe they're made of clay, or maybe they're made of Orangeburg, or maybe they're made of another product that has cracks in it. And so that was a common way for perk to get into the soils. What we do know is that around the year 2000, the EPA got involved with this site because the contamination had hit the property immediately to the north, and the EPA needed to remediate a current significant problem, and so the EPA was involved, and it's my understanding that they determined at the time that the perk was in fact flowing to the north. I'm not aware of any more recent study that flagged where it was, the precise location of it, and neither was Matt. Matt did say that he suspects because of the high water table, it's hitting the groundwater here in this area and flowing into the Allen Creek, getting into the Huron River. So you are right, it is a significant problem. We don't have a ton of information. I think Councilmember Ackerman hit the nail on the head that local governments, county governments, state, federal governments don't have the resources to deal with a problem like this. The one resource available to us is the brownfield process, which allows cleanup through development. And that's basically what we have to work with. This site is quite small, not likely to become a EPA Superfund site. Brett, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, no, I think that's a great summary. Our expectation generally is that if you imagine sort of an elongated teardrop with the focus being under Armin Cleaners at the south end of that block, and that is, we anticipate that it is moving basically parallel slightly to the east as it moves to the north along with the watershed. And my understanding is that's been verified through some of the sampling and some of the adjacent properties as well, through both interconnectivity of stormwater systems and through some gas vapor monitoring of some of those enclosed spaces. So generally, my understanding is that there is some level of confirmation that it is definitely moving under the adjacent houses. As Jeff said, I don't have an exact sort of rendering that shows the extent of it, but based on that and the sort of hydrology in the area, we anticipate that if it's not already along that corridor, it's probably on its way.
And just to add, I think from some other past history, I think that Matt Nod had said something about, for sure, that first basement, if not the second one, though the levels weren't as high. So just in terms of getting a sense of where that is, that I think for sure those first two lots have recorded issues based on the environmental toxicity that's going on. And what we don't, I think, have a sense of is sort of how fast it's moving, or, things like that. So I think we don't know that it's all the way up to Washington area or anything like that, but that it definitely is in those first two lots. But it seems like the most intense is in the basement of the one to the north, I think is.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to clarify that came up in public comments was that this is the room where it happens, just to clarify people on the process. So we are voting tonight on whether or not to make a recommendation to City Council to approve or not approve this zoning. So this isn't the final hurdle. So if this is of interest and concern, keep up with City Council, because they do not have to go along with whatever we recommend. And I guess I had a little bit to say about affordability since that came up. I had a question related to that. And I'm wrestling with this. I live in a 120-year-old house in a very non-conforming lot. And I would like one day, if I ever can afford it, to add a little bit more space on. So I can definitely sympathize with people who live here who would like it to be a little bit easier. It's already a huge challenge, so I can see that side of this. And given the likelihood of change with the historic district commission involved, like, I very, very much can see that side as being beneficial. On the other side, from an affordability angle, these are already $400,000 to $500,000 plus houses, so I don't really buy the argument that this is affordable housing in any way, in the sense of the term. And so redevelopment wouldn't likely be significantly affordable either, but I don't see that as a really strong argument. But one question I had was, with the zoning, would it be possible for accessory dwelling units to be added on these if, on the existing parcels, if we zoned it to R2A or no? I can't remember.
I'm gonna let Brett take that.
With a proposed amendment, you'll recall that of all of the feared unintended consequences of the adoption of the Unified Development Code, unfortunately, one of them was realized is that accessory dwelling units were only provided in the R1s and inadvertently left out of the R2A. So that will be one of the proposed amendments I'll be bringing to you. So if, presuming that that is reinstituted as the accessory dwelling unit ordinance was originally adopted in 2016, then yes.
I see. So we actually, when it was first adopted, they were allowed in R2A, and then with the redraft, it was okay. Good to know. And I know we'll be talking about those soon, so maybe that'll be on our plate to address. But as it's written now, no, because that sort of also is another way we get, more units and so a different mix without redevelopment. But I really like the character versus health, I think, is sort of the big tension, and I appreciate staff's highlighting of the issue. I do think the fact that this isn't a historic district gives me a lot less concern about there being a potential dramatic change to the character. I think that's a pretty strong backstop, whether or not the zoning changes. I also think it would be, I have a hard time imagining a development that would pass that bar, that would also be valuable enough to trigger the money we would need to do the cleanup. So I'm kind of inclined to leave the potential on the table, even though I don't think it's going to happen, because I think the things that we're most worried about are still pretty well protected. So I'm kind of leaning in the direction of the staff. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. But this is a tough one.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So this is a question for staff. Right now, a couple of those houses are used as commercial properties for commercial businesses. What happens to those if we rezone it residential, whether these businesses or the potential for a future business on that strip?
We know that at least one of the homes includes a business use. It would become non-conforming with regard to use.
So if they wanted to sell that as a business, the
use would continue as an existing non-conforming use, but you might have trouble changing that use. Currently, I think there's a home that's being used for an office use. If it were rezoned to R2A and somebody wanted to lease it for residential, they could, but they could not go back to the office.
So once it changed, then. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Woods.
So in reading the notes that staff provided, it looks as if one of the property owners there contacted their city council member, and that sort of started to initiate this process. So do we have a sense as to the other 6 property and their uses and owners and what their thinking is about this?
I have spoken with a couple. One was the owner of the home that is being used for a business, and they did not want to see any rezoning. They wanted to keep the C2B. The previous speaker, whose name was Jeff, indicated that he has an ownership interest in one of the parcels, so we did hear from him tonight. I did speak with one additional person who just wanted to mostly know what was going on. Most of the, there's only one owner occupant along these 7 parcels. They were the ones who initiated this process. Since then, they've expressed an interest to not build an addition, but to build a second floor deck instead, which would not require site plan approval.
Thank you.
So just as comments from me, so I would be in favor of rezoning if we didn't have the contamination on the site. Now that we have the contamination there, I do agree with staff that C2B is the best chance that we have for this to be, for that to be cleaned up at some point in the future. Where I get my comfort in keeping this C2B and declining this, this motion is that we have the historic district to protect us. If we didn't have that, then I would be all in favor of rezoning, but I feel like that's there to protect us, so that any future development would have to go before the Historic District Commission, and their approval would be needed before it would show up on our desk here. So I will be voting against this motion this evening. Further discussion? Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for those comments. I think that is where my head is tonight. I originally voted in favor of the resolution to explore the rezoning to R2A, and at that time, it seemed like a no-brainer that this was a reasonable step to ensure, to give more predictability of what the neighborhood would look like down the road. I think that's reasonable, and neighbors deserve that. Knowing now the environmental state, I have a lot more pause, and with the knowledge I have tonight, I think I have to be firm on environmental public health first and character second. So I think tonight I'll be voting no, but I do want to give assurances that I'll keep an open mind. I'm the only one at this table who will vote on this again at the city council table, and I will make a promise to sit down with Councilmember Smith and Councilmember Wylie to talk through these concerns. But tonight, with the information presented and the environmental state of the properties, with, again, the assurances that the historic district has first pass at allowing any redevelopment of this site, I'm inclined to vote not to recommend the rezoning on this set of rezonings.
Are you ready for a vote? All right. Mr. Leonard, if you can do a roll call.
I would be glad to. All right, so the motion is to recommend rezoning from C2B to R2A. So yay would be in support of R2A, and nay would be to recommend keeping the zoning as it is as C2B. Commissioner Milstein?
No.
Commissioner Mills?
No.
Commissioner Gibrandal?
No.
Commissioner Ackerman?
No.
Commissioner Sauvé?
No.
Commissioner Trudeau?
No.
Commissioner Weatherby?
No.
Commissioner Woods?
No.
And a unanimous recommendation.
Thank you. Moving on to West Hoover Avenue and West Davis Avenue area rezoning. We will begin with.
As soon as our other planner arrives.
All right. So let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, moving on to item 9C in our agenda in regards to the West Hoover Avenue and West Davis Avenue area rezoning. We'll begin with our staff report, and we have Ms. Stilio here.
Thank you very much. This is the West Hoover Avenue, West Davis Avenue area rezoning. I can be close. It is on, but I can be closer. Thanks. This is a study we conducted at the direction of City Council. They passed a resolution in September for staff to study the area and the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on whether it should be rezoned to R1D or R1E. The area is currently zoned R4C. You'll see that we've come up with a slightly different recommendation than a straight rezoning for the entire area, and I'll explain our recommendation and our rationale. The study area is about 13 acres. It has 70 lots in it. Most of the lots have a single-family home, but there are some multifamily buildings, and there's including one large apartment building. There are currently 9 conforming lots. 9 of the 70 are conforming. The area has about 127 dwelling units. That's approximate. It wouldn't be too much off, but I can't vouch that particular number. Assuming that number, though, it's about 9.5 dwelling units per acre. As I mentioned, 9 of the lots are conforming, 61 are non-conforming. There are just 3 conforming multiple family developments. There are more in the neighborhood, probably upwards of 10 to a dozen, but only 3 of them are conforming. These maps here, the top map are the conforming lots in the study area. The middle map are the lots that are between, and there are 52 of them, lots that are between 4,000 square feet and 8,499 square feet. And those numbers are the 8,500 is the minimum lot size of the R4C, and 4,000 square feet is the smallest single-family district that we have, the R1E. So those are the lots, those purple ones in the middle map. Those are sort of the swing lots. Those could become conforming depending on what district we pick. But the bottom map has 9 lots. Those are less than 4,000 square feet. Those lots would not be conforming no matter what district they were rezoned to. They have less than 4,000 square feet, and we don't have a zoning district, a residential zoning district that is that small. So we focused on the middle group, the 52 lots that we could make more conforming. This is a map of the existing zoning in the study area. You'll see the study area is R4C. Immediately to the north is mostly R4C. The west side is R2A. And on the south and west sides of the district is R1D. Across the street on South Main, you've got some more R4C and a little corner of office. We are proposing, because it became apparent in the planning process that just entirely rezoning the district would to either R1D or R1E would create some new nonconformities, and really the goal should be reducing the nonconformities as well as preserving the existing character. We found that if we just focus on the best fit and maybe consider not rezoning all of the properties, that we can achieve those goals. So this is what we recommend. We recommend that actually 58 of the lots be rezoned to R1D, identified in yellow on this map here, and 4 of them be rezoned to R1E, giving those getting as close to conformance as possible. There is an address by address list in the staff report for convenience. Pardon. Here we go. What this rezoning scheme does is make the lots that are in the new R1D district, 45 of them, 78%, would become conforming. The lots that would be zoned R1E, 1 of them would be conforming, 25%, but that's up from 0%. The 8 lots that are kept R4C, 6 of them would be conforming, 75%, and non-conforming 25%. That even better than flip-flops the numbers. Right now, 82% are non-conforming. That would go to 25%. No conforming lot is made non-conforming, and no conforming multiple family use is made non-conforming. Any existing non-conforming uses, whether they be a duplex in the neighborhood or a multifamily, would remain non-conforming. So there's basically no change of status there. I would note that the occupancy limits would be reduced in the new R1D and R1E districts. Multiple family district allows up to 6 unrelated persons, and the single family districts allow up to 4 unrelated persons. Both districts allow a family of any size. Family is defined as persons related by blood, marriage, or adoption. And those would take effect upon a change in household type. If there is a existing dwelling there that is currently occupied by 6 unrelated persons, and it's registered and certified with the rental housing services as for 6 occupants, it can remain as a non-conforming or grandfathered. And that would continue as long as that certification is valid for that number of occupants. If there was a change, if say a family lived there, or if it no longer became a rental, it's owner occupied, was not certified as a rental, and then it became a rental again. But it would need that trigger. Nothing about this rezoning change would automatically trigger a required change in occupancy. In our staff report, I've gone through some of this data analysis. We've also listed in the staff report some of the benefits and the pros and cons. As with any policy decision, there would be pros and cons. This would serve to preserve the existing character. The study area is basically a neighborhood of single-family homes. Most of the multifamily units there are converted from those single-family homes. There are a handful of what were tear-downs and new builds in a more multifamily style. But it's basically a single-family neighborhood. But the current zoning designation threatens the character because of its inherent requirement to combine lots. You need to combine lots in this neighborhood to get that 8,500 square foot lot size, and then you can develop a multifamily use. So rezoning to single family removes that pressure to combine the lots in order to redevelop. This is sort of a current situation of go big or go home. You need to go big by tearing down the existing homes and developing multifamily, new construction. There is no way to work with the existing buildings and the existing zoning. But a con to this scheme is that the criticism that we are going to single-family zoning when many other progressive communities are up zoning, but we are down zoning. There are some mitigating factors to this. Now that it would be single-family zoning, these homes, many of them, most of them, would be eligible to have an accessory dwelling unit, which effectively doubles the density on a lot. Not all would take advantage of this because they either can't or don't choose to, so it's not that automatically the density would double, but it's a point of note that there are still opportunities to increase density even if it is down zoned to single family. I'll say a little bit about a process that we undertook. After council passed that resolution in September, we did our planning work and we developed our findings and preliminary recommendations. We held some informational meetings. We held 3 of them. Everyone within the study area and within 1,000 feet were invited to meetings, open house style meetings that were held. We had 3 meetings, a morning, an afternoon, and an evening meeting in December. And then for this public hearing tonight, notices were mailed to residents and property owners within the study area and 300 feet surrounding. In my staff report, I've attached the council resolution as well as my preliminary findings and recommendations. In that document, I go through some more of the history of the area. I also went through what does a non-conforming mean, a conforming mean. I've also attached some study area maps. The same ones shown here, and they are provided in the staff report. I would welcome any questions. And in case I didn't already cover it, but staff's recommendation is to rezone 58 specific lots from R4C to R1D and an additional 4 to R1E as listed in the staff report.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing on this item. If you'd like to address the Planning Commission, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello again, Vince Crusoe, 556 Glendale Circle. I would make some of the same comments I made to the previous proposal. I would hope you'd support City Council's desire to vote for the resolution that they proposed. I think, there's a lot of concern with this site in that there's a lot of pressure to develop for the athletic campus area. I don't know that what we've gotten with athletic campus development is really beneficial to the city. A lot of these sites become dormant most of the time during the year and become only active during football games or occasionally basketball games. I think this community and others are fearful of how developers can come in and change dramatically the character of the neighborhoods. And I think they're worried about the city of Ann Arbor, maintaining the character of their neighborhoods. And I'll just make an example of, to cite the one you're talking about, Armin Cleaner. I was with the CARD group. I was a founding member. We had discussions with the county about the 1,4-dioxin contamination, and this Armin Cleaner site came up. My wife's a toxicologist at the university. We had a lot of discussion about the Armin Cleaner site and how dangerous it was. And my impression from county discussions I had was that the city was dragging its feet on dealing with that Armin Cleaner site, and that the city was supposed to do a appraisal, and it just dragged on forever, and the county was very upset that that did not move quickly so that they could deal with it and try and get some resolution on that site. And so I see, that was an indication to, I think, that community that they need to step up for themselves and make sure that they look out for themselves, because I think the Armin Cleaner site is particularly bad. I think it's dangerous for that community. I think the chemical and the chemicals that are vapor intrusion into those homes is very negative, and EPA came in and did the test and showed that they were being exposed. So I think, we need to make sure that we maintain the quality of life in these neighborhoods, not just go for the quick bang, and hope for the best that, that long-term that those 6-bedroom apartments will, work out in the long term, and that the football Sunday condos will turn into, regular families moving in, because I don't think that that's a beneficial development for the city. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Abraham Marsband. I own 1002 Myron Court, which is one of those lots that are proposed to be R1E. That Myron Court Street is, if you look at that map, I don't know if you can show that, everybody can see it. It's going to be sandwiched between, on the east side, Main Street houses, which is R4C, on the west side with the apartments, on the south side with another R4C. So if we rezone that to R1E, and at some point these R4C buildings that are going to go up, and Myron Court residents won't, just like the other gentleman said, we are not going to see the sun. So that's I object to being rezoned to R1E, the Myron Court lots. We are sandwiched, we will be sandwiched between R4Cs. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Joe Hubert. I'm at 302 West Hoover. I've been a resident in the neighborhood, lived in the neighborhood, owned home since January 2005. I just want to state that I fully support the rezoning.
Good evening. I'm Savannah Heller. I live at 128 West Hoover, which is in the proposed rezoning area. I already submitted a letter to you earlier today that has more extensive comments, but I just want to offer my strong support for rezoning the neighborhood to R1D or R1E, depending. This is a neighborhood of modest homes. They're not fancy for the most part, but those of us who live there care deeply about it and about preserving the character of it. Someone who spoke earlier about the Ashley neighborhood said that they have felt a big negative impact from all the construction, and that also applies to our area. We're feeling buffeted and threatened, first by the two large buildings that have gone up on either side of Main Street, but closer to home, recently, the two condo buildings that have gone up on West Davis near Main, one of which is actually directly behind my backyard. We really feel that the character of the neighborhood is being negatively affected by all this construction. It's produced a lot of anxiety, and we're just concerned about preserving the character that remains. I want to thank you again for considering this. My one, I guess, concern about the proposal, which I also mentioned in my letter, is that, again, those houses that flank the beginning of West Hoover where it meets Main, I think one is 916 South Main and the other one is maybe 1000 or 1002, I can't remember, but they're right on the northwest and southwest corners. Those are currently single-family homes, although they are zoned R4C. They're quite old. They're both over 100 years old. They're beautiful, and I would hate to see them raised to make way for new development that might not be so aesthetically pleasing. If you haven't done so, I'd urge you to just walk our neighborhood and see what the impact of the new condos on Davis has been. We don't want Hoover to end up looking like that. So again, thank you for considering this proposal.
Thank you.
Good evening. Matt Healy, 300 West Hoover, in the study area, homeowner since 2010. Strongly in support of this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council rezone 58 lots in the West Hoover Avenue, West Davis Avenue area from R4C multiple family dwelling district to R1D single family dwelling district, and 4 lots in the same area to R1E single family dwelling district as mapped and listed in the February 5th, 2019 staff report after studying the area as directed and as recommended by the future land use chapter of the master plan. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. Discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to this last piece, this came about through a resolution that Councilmember Smith put forward in September of 2018. I'm glad to see it coming forward. I think this exercise with this particular motion underscores better than anything that zoning really is a modern creation and a very imperfect one. That a lot of these properties predate our city's zoning code, and that's why some of them don't fit any of our definitions excuse me, of what can be built today or what is conforming today. Ultimately, I intend to support this. I was excited about it in September, and I'm excited to see this coming back with staff's recommendation of rezoning, and also the very delicate balancing of, this is quite the complicated jigsaw. So I appreciate all the work. I think just a couple clarifying questions. With respect to 1004 South Main, it's not highlighted, nor is, I think that's 211 Hoover. Are those going to be R4C? Yeah, okay. They'll be R4, those are the two R4Cs that will be non-conforming?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. To kind of start to speak towards the gentleman who had concerns about the R1E being surrounded, could you share what the R4C side and rear setbacks are, so that if 125 Hoover were ever redeveloped as an R4C, or 1000 and 1004 Main were ever redeveloped as an R4C, what that interaction would be like?
Certainly, give me 1 second.
I will just say the fact that the segment of R1E is being inserted certainly decreases the likelihood of large-scale redevelopment, just because you all act as kind of a firewall between the two sets of properties. So anything very large-scale, you know, the odds are reduced, but certainly something could still be built. So just want to get a better sense of what that could be.
Sure. The R4C district has a 25-foot front setback requirement, or the average of the block. And it has a 12-foot side setback on each side. Additional is required for a particularly long or deep building. 50 feet is the threshold for long. And it has a 30-foot rear setback.
Okay.
And again, that 30-foot rear setback would be increased for a particularly long building.
Got it. So if I'm interpreting that correctly, for 1000 and 1004 South Main Street, the setback from any R1E, potentially R1E neighbors would be 30 feet. However, for 125 West Hoover, that setback could be as little as 12 feet.
Could be 12 feet on the side, but from its neighbors on Pauline, it would be 30 feet.
Got it. And does R4C take into account, I guess, what is the rear setback for R1E? I recall it being larger than that.
R1E is 20 feet.
That's the rear. What's the side for R1E?
3.
3, okay. And what's the side for R1D?
3 as well.
Okay,
D is in dog.
got it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So R1D neighbors could build a house much closer to the property line than any R4C neighbor. However, an R4C building could be larger.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. I know we have a commissioner who lives in the neighborhood, so I'm sure she will have more targeted questions, but I'm really glad to see this coming back, and I really appreciate the delicate balancing act that this was.
I too am glad that we had an opportunity to look at this, but I am open to listening to discussion. But I think for me, it highlights that there's a big part of our code that's broken, and that is R4C. Because one of the things that Ms. DeLeo said early on is, and in her exercise, which was fantastic, like I cannot compliment you enough, I think, in terms of doing the analysis and the jigsaw puzzles and how many properties we would bring into conformance from one scenario versus another. I think it's fantastic. But one of the criteria was minimizing nonconformities. And right now, I don't know exactly the percentage of land area, but is it right to say over half of R4C properties are nonconforming?
I think specifically 82%.
82% of R4C properties are nonconforming. So it is not just this neighborhood that has this problem. It is 82% of neighborhoods that are zoned this way that have this problem. And so I want to try to remedy things for this neighborhood, but I don't want to lose sight of the bigger picture. And I think that we really need to think about this systematically. So in terms of your analysis, like, I think that you're absolutely right. We can think about density here a couple of different ways. And this, on the books, may be a downzoning, but with ADUs, it could bring it almost into parity. But that really assumes that everybody builds an ADU. If everybody builds an ADU, then we could get something like 16 units per acre. Now, each of those units, because in our one district, our functional families are smaller, each of those units are gonna have fewer people. One of those units at least is gonna have to be owner occupied according to our thing. And we know, just given the uptake of of ADUs so far, like, we're not gonna see all of that. In R4C right now, you could build 20 units per acre, but in order to do that, because R4C is broken, you have to combine lots and tear them down. But tear down houses and combine lots. That's what's happening here. And that's what's happening in R4C in many places in order to get a big enough lot to actually do something and achieve that density. So the problem right now is that we can't achieve that density, which we know has many benefits for our community, and this is right on great transportation lines. This is the place where you want people to live. They can walk to campus still, they can walk to downtown, they can hop on the multiple buses. We can't achieve that right now because you have to tear down properties and combine them. And the people who want to stay in a single family residence in this neighborhood, which you should be able to stay in a single family residence, can't do anything to their property either because it's not conforming. And so it's like the worst of all worlds, and it's because R4C is broken. And by the way, we've known this for a while. Actually, maybe Commissioner Weatherby will fill us in, but even before she was on Planning Commission, she was on the commission trying to figure out how to fix R4C. Like, this is an ongoing problem that we've just kicked the can down the road, and we need to stop kicking it down the road because, like, this is a challenge. One of the best things that I think came out of Alexis's research on this is looking at an early version of R4C that actually showed that there was a scale. And the number of units that you were allowed to build on a property and potentially even, I don't know if it included the setbacks, but was based on the size of your property. It's not like now where you have to have 8,500 square feet in order to do anything. Back then it was a one-bedroom unit, you needed this much square footage. In a two-bedroom unit, you needed this much square footage. I think that's a very cool piece of history to uncover. But I think that it's something that we need to consider in going back to that. In looking at, the analysis that was emailed to us earlier, thank you, Mr. Leonard, for what kind of variances have been applied for in this district. There's not tons, and there's not tons that would be necessarily affected by this. I want to use this as an opportunity to say we need to do R4C. And so I hate to downzone this and then turn around and fix R4C and then upzone it. I just don't think that will happen. And so that's why I'm really uncomfortable supporting this at this point.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Okay, so I have a lot of opinions about this. There are many of them conflicting. I agree with everything that Commissioner Mills said. However, I first started working on the R4C zoning 9 years ago. I'm also now on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And a lot of lots in this area, I think a lot of them are small houses, people would like to add on, and they're not going to be able to do that now. I think R4C is broken. I don't think it does what we want it to do. I don't, from the ZBA side, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the fact that these are all out of compliance, to a large part of, I think I would be okay rezoning these all into compliance, but with the understanding that that could change soon on a city scale.
10 years.
because it's been 9 years and we haven't even really touched it, I think any sort of large-scale rezoning or even fixing of R4C is going to be years. And I think we need to have a lot of conversations as a community about where we want to go with zoning and how we want to do it. Myron Court, I love Myron Court. Myron Court is awesome. And it would be great if we could have more places like Myron Court. That would allow a lot of density in areas, but single-family homes and some of the things that we want. We don't really allow Myron Courts now, and I think that's a problem, because I think it would be great if our city was set up to, in some of these areas, allow more building like that. I think people would love those areas. So I'm really conflicted here because, and yes, I look out at this. This is exactly what I see out my front yard. I live on Main Street. My front window looks out on this area. So I see the changes. I am less upset by the changes than I think some people. But I've had a while to look at this and a while to get used to these things. I know a lot of people are looking for housing. We need to discuss affordable housing. We need to discuss a lot of housing issues in our city, and we can't say everything has to stay the same, but we need affordable housing. That's just not going to happen. We're going to all have to make some changes, and some of those changes may be hard, and people will be affected in different ways. So I guess I'm inclined to support this. I think a lot of work has gone into this, and I never thought that even this many would be conforming. I think you've done yeoman's work trying to get these conforming. I'm okay with making these more conforming. It's also, they line up with the other half of their block, which I think has some, it's a little strange to be on one side of a block in one zoning and one side of a block in another zoning. So I think this fixes some of the problems, but it fixes a tiny little problem in this tiny little area. It does not fix the issue of zoning across the city and even in the downtown area. I think it helps some people for a short period of time. And I think the fact that we can bring a large number of these houses into compliance, I think is a good thing. But I don't think zoning this and crossing it off the list is being done. I don't think that's true. I think these areas are going to change. I think the safest way to keep your house and your area the way you want it is to continue to own it, and then you can do what you want with it. I mean, within the zoning code. But I think Ann Arbor is going to change for better or for worse, and I'd like to see it change for better and be accessible to more people. I think most people in this neighborhood bought, and they were fairly reasonable houses. I know I didn't pay a lot for my house, and the fact that the houses across the street from me are now selling for 10 times what I bought my house for, that's a big problem in our city, and we're going to need to address it. We can start here, as Commissioner Mills kind of wants to start now, instead of kicking that can down the road. I'm okay with kicking the can, but we can't do it very much, and we can't do it for very long, because I think we're causing a lot of problems by ignoring this and by not looking at our zoning in a wholesale way. So I'm willing to rezone this particular area because I think this does help. I think bringing it into compliance helps, but it is an issue, and I'm not saying that I'm done with zoning in this area.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Yeah, I have very similar feelings that we've already heard, so I'll try to keep it short. I mostly agree where previous commissioners have agreed. and I think for me also the big takeaway was that looking at this was it just highlights all the things that I don't like about our zoning code and the tools we don't have, because we like these neighborhoods are great and people love them, and we don't let ourselves build this way anymore. It's illegal to like build them this way, and because the zoning is so broken. And in addition to R4C, I think even just going back to Myron Court, which I agree is awesome, and I love those little courtyard pockets in our neighborhoods. And R1E is a relatively recent addition to our zoning ordinance, which was the intent was to make it easier to build small houses on small lots, which are more affordable and can adapt to sort of our quirky city environment. And even here, only one of them would come into compliance. So you still can't build a Myron Court. I think that's also something to think about, like how can we get that like small house, small lot kind of infill quirkiness without creating big, massive projects to get the density. But yeah, and I very much sympathize with Commissioner Mills. Like we need to fix this. But I think I kind of agree with Commissioner Weatherby. Like it's going to be a while, and I'm like I have my house as R4C, and I'd love the zoning to change some like, things in my neighborhood to go differently. But it's if we live with R4C for a while, we're going to see. I think we'll see more of the tear downs, more of these, which I don't think are great. Like they're either the $1 million condos or they're the really boxy kind of ugly apartment buildings surrounded by motive parking. You know, and there's things we could change in the ordinance to get something different. But more of that, I don't think is really going to be like I'd love to see more density, but I don't necessarily want to see a march of that kind of density into the neighborhood. But yeah, I mean, zoning changes are big, and if we change this, it's unlikely to change back, even if we think we want to, if we can fix it later. So I'm on the fence on it, but I think I'm leaning towards supporting it, but happily hear what other commissioners have to say.
Commissioner Sauvé.
So I'm looking at two maps simultaneously, the rezoning, but then the overall R4C and 87% out of conformance? 82%? Going the other way.
Yeah. This neighborhood, 87%.
Overall,
Citywide,
82%. If we start this process, do we start converting more R4Cs because 82% are out of compliance into the R1D? And now do we go through this process of giving attention to down zoning instead of giving attention to solving R4C? So that's actually what I'm looking at, is distracting ourselves from the larger problem that we have of zoning by fixing pieces at a time into a down zoning scenario. I understand the problems with it. I come from a more commercial architecture, background where we deal a lot with out of compliance, and you see a lot of tear downs, and adaptive reuse isn't a very friendly area in zoning. And we saw even in the previous one, the houses that were businesses, adaptive reuse is very hard in zoning. And so trying to protect character and trying to enable more density with similar character, I think looking citywide at what this movement would create with this vote to 82% more, I don't want to support movement in that direction. And so that's where my position is.
And I am of equal mindset, although I'm incredibly supportive of this rezoning. We have a much, much bigger problem in this city. It's a huge problem, and I plan to oppose this, and with a message to City Council, get us the funds needed to hire a consultant so that we can fix this problem. It's a big problem, and it needs to be fixed. Hearing those numbers, 87%, that's huge. So this definitely needs to be fixed, although I'm supportive of what the plan is and what's being proposed. I'm very supportive of it, but this is a much greater problem. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would advocate strongly that we still support this change tonight. And ultimately, I would expect that's the direction of council. This came forward through a council resolution trying to address specific needs voiced by residents. And I think that's an appropriate thing to do. Along major transit corridors, it preserves denser zoning while bringing in a lot more existing houses that we've all expressed, appreciation for into compliance. If there is interest in this body, I guess careful what you wish for. The next city council meeting is on the 18th, and I'm happy to introduce a resolution that directs this body to get to work on R4C.
Mr. Leonard.
It's already on your work
Yeah,
plan.
it's already on our work plan.
I
Been there for years.
can give us a deadline. I can give us a deadline. I can give us a prompt to explore, potential budgeting if we do need external support, or whatever. I can explore budget implications. I guess we have a broken system. Residents came forward asking for a solution. Systemic change takes a little longer. I would rather alleviate the effects of a broken system for a group of people who came forward. And then, do the hard work of fixing the system as well. I'll leave it there for now.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Just another little note, this area is specifically called out in the master plan for this sort of action. So just as a note.
Commissioner Mills.
This is why, I hedge early on, but I'm open to changing my mind. So first, I think I am very concerned about a slippery slope, right? And so I think I was thinking that in my mind, but I appreciate Commissioner Sauvé saying that. I think that if we rezone one neighborhood, it's easy to go down that slippery slope. So, Commissioner Ackerman, I wonder is this even possible? I don't want us to see any more of these rezonings while we're undertaking R4C. Is it possible to have something? No, never mind. Okay, bad idea. That's what I'm really concerned about. I think that it's a legitimate concern. It's going to take some time, and I think that there are people who would rather have their neighborhood potentially zoned to single family, and I don't like the message that this sends, especially because this is not the only neighborhood in this situation. I take Commissioner Weatherby's point about the master plan specifically calling for it, and I think that's helpful, and that certainly gives backup here. Even then, this is a great place for. This has really great transit access, and so in terms of density of any if we're trying to densify generally. Right, I think that's something that maybe our master plan revision is going to consider overall, and so that seems to be moving in the wrong direction. But I really don't like the idea of this serving. I also recognize that there are people in the community in this neighborhood that have asked for this, and so I want to be respectful of that. But this is a system this is a problem across the city, not just here, and I don't want it to be the slippery slope, but it looks like it's going to get yelled at. So.
Just two quick observations. I think that there are many R4Cs across the city that don't have that sort of specific recommendation in the master plan. So I think that is relevant. I'm not saying it's the only determinant, but it's relevant. And I would, as it relates to another rezoning, because if hypothetically this is recommended one way or another by Planning Commission and council takes action on it, I want to caution you from getting too far down a precedent slope. When we are considering zonings, we are considering it from the master plan language, we're considering context, as you talked about this area, we are considering specific aspects of its relationship to other areas of the city, to transportation networks, both motorized and non. So to be more clear, because this area is deemed appropriate for rezoning, doesn't mean that all other areas might reach the same conclusion. So it's not to say that it might not spark other applications, but they are really considered in their individual context. So I wouldn't be fearful that by taking action here that it is somehow paving the way for a predetermined decision for the next petition that you have. It's not to say it might not cause more such applications, but they are really uniquely analyzed and determined. And you and ultimately the city council might find different conclusions on similar asks.
Commissioner Woods.
I was going to say something similar to that, but he put it so much better. But there is sort of a tension between what we as a planning commission do and what council does in responding to what residents are asking them about. So I think this has been a good discussion to have for us to see that sometimes there are not perfect solutions, but sometimes you do have to go with what works in that case. I am going to support this, and I want to thank Mr. Leo for all of the charts and all of the information and everything. I think that was really helpful. And we can use that as we perhaps may look at other areas of the city, and this kind of information is really helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Trudeau.
So I'm going to do what Mr. Leonard advised us not to do, which is worry about precedent and future consequence, which the other side of the slippery slope that I would worry about is not only are we going to see more applications like this, but related to that, like, is that going to accelerate interest in redevelopment and tear downs in other parts of the city? Like, if there's anticipation that that's going to happen and the opportunities for infill will be reduced even more dramatically in the downtown adjacent neighborhoods, are we going to see my neighborhood get even more really giant, really expensive condo buildings and multi-million-dollar single-family homes on D2 lots, which is coming soon, and other things like that, because we're taking that step and potentially unleashing the dam. So I mean, I'm very much still on the fence. I think I'm still inclined to support this, although I don't really like it. I'd really like to get to fixing R4C. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else has anything to chime in with.
Anyone? Anyone?
I think I'm going to support this, but barely is the way I feel. I'm conflicted as well. The fact that it is called out in the master plan is a separate thing does make somewhat of a difference to me, and I guess I feel a little bit like Commissioner Weatherby. This isn't the last. Don't think that this may not change. I just think the pace of the change is going to be city pace, which is, it's going to be a long time. But I feel like don't hold me to it in terms of the bigger context, but that it makes sense for now is kind of what I'm feeling like. But this is a hard one for me.
So I want to vote yes, very much so, but I'm going to vote no for one reason, and that is in hopes that some city council members will look at the minutes and really read them and see that there's a greater problem. Commissioner Ackerman.
I'm happy to express that.
Thank you. All right, let's do a roll call.
Thought that might be coming. So the motion as read, an affirmative vote would be a recommendation to rezone in the scheme as presented in the staff report, the 52 parcels to R1D and 4 parcels to R1E. Commissioner Milstein?
No.
Commissioner Mills?
No.
Commissioner Gibb Randall?
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
No.
Commissioner Trudeau?
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby?
Yes.
Commissioner Woods?
Yes.
The motion fails without 6 supporting votes.
Thank you. This moves on to City Council. When will it be before City Council?
I would estimate about a month from now, give or take.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to any item? Any item at all? Seeing no one, we'll move on to Commission proposed business. Are there? Commissioner Mills.
Clearly R4C, but that's already on our list. Could, Mr. Leonard, could you please add into our list of what we want to think about for parking? Could you add the tandem parking or whatever that's called? I don't want to lose that. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah.
Mr. Leonard.
If I could, I was fascinated by this, sorry. From the 1970 census to the 2010 census, which is the last 2 hard data counts in the city, the city's population has increased by 13,899 people. That's about 0.95 people every day over that 40-year period. Almost one person. Before 1970? I'm just doing the best I can. Yeah, yeah. But so for the last 40 years, about 1 per person, or 1 person per day. U of M enrollment has gone up steadily over that time period. Still trying to pull some of that data, but I suspect it's a big chunk of that. So I suspect that some of our resident population has been even flatter over that time period. I think, I don't know yet. It's complicated. Technically, a student should be counted where they spend the most of their time. So in theory, the census should count a resident, on-campus resident, or at-school resident here, as opposed to maybe their hometown.
Students count towards our poverty rate as well.
Yep. Another data point that I want to have back, I shared with you that we had approved 304 units in 2018. I think that was overly bureaucratic of me. That is the number of units that have not only been approved by a board, but has satisfied all execution of any conditions, development agreements, and the like. It's been gnawing at me ever since then. I think that is more interesting to you as a commissioner and ultimately to the city council are the decisions that you're making at this table relative to those units. So I'd like to amend that report to reflect the amount of projects that actually have been approved at either the planning commission or city council table. It's not 304, but it is 757 in 2018. 747, excuse me. So again, that reflects some that we're still putting finishing touches on a development agreement or something like that. And I think that's a more valid data point for you as commissioners and generally to the public to a large extent as well. So
that's units.
that is residential units, not bedrooms, number of homes, the amount of non-commercial non-residential square feet was the same at 115,000. So, and then lastly, there are 4 things that are sort of in various states of analysis of the Planning Commission, all on your work plan. We have accessory dwelling units, where we've got, I will anticipate bringing you some proposed language for consideration at working session and then for future schedule. Then we have transit-oriented zoning. We have parking requirements, and we have now, and R4C is on our work plan. And so I'd like to spend some time perhaps at our working session prioritizing which of those is how we allocate our time and our resources to those initiatives. Does that seem like a good plan? Mm-hmm. Okay, all right.
In that, could you indicate which or, if any, you think would require some outside consulting to be able to?
I could, but to be clear right now, I don't have those resources. So
Mm-hmm.
anything we're, at a minimum, anything we would want to make progress on from now until July 1st.
Right.
I don't have that budget. It's not to say we couldn't take something to council and ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is that might be challenging in the context of the overall budget discussion that's also happening right now.
Right.
So, but I can try and frame that. I actually am coming to this more of the sense that I don't know how many resources may be available, and so I'd like to have that conversation with all of you to say, if we are resource constrained, which one
Right.
it seems most compelling for us to move forward with.
Mhm.
So I'd love to do them all, and maybe that is the answer, but I think if we're going to do that, I think we have to acknowledge that it's going to be a longer, more protracted process. If one of those sort of rises to the level of this has to be done first, then I would really like us to consider putting more resources into that so we can make some more progress on this.
It would be helpful to know how much staff time is required
Yeah.
on these 4 items,
Right.
and
Yeah.
how much time in general you expect that it would take.
Sure.
And whether or not you foresee a need for a consultant.
Yeah, I will try to frame all of that. It'll be speculative, but fortunately, we've got some history with at least one of these where we can look at how much time was involved in that case. And I will try to bring some ideas to that meeting for that purpose.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So I think parking is going to be part of just about everything in that. I know it was a big topic of conversation for R4C. So I mean, you know that, but I don't know that we can take parking separate from, and I mean, I think transit-oriented zoning and stuff is all going to include that. So as much as I'd like to say, hey, R4C, I think parking's going to be a huge part of all of them and maybe shouldn't be taken as a piece of, but rather a kind of a whole.
Commissioner Mills.
These are the ordinance changes in addition to the master plan that we are scoping out as well.
We have issued a request for proposals actually for a master plan, but one of the, so the timing of that is really great, that I am looking forward to seeing the proposals we get and the anticipated range of costs with that. I have put that, we have requested that as part of the budget process. It's challenging for everybody to get their hands around until we get a better sense of what the scope of those costs might be. So, so it's, I say that to say it's beyond scoping. We have, I've put together a scope, I shared it with the master plan subcommittee, and we've actually issued it. It's available on the website if anybody would like to see it. Proposals are due on March 7th, go through an evaluation process that will then dovetail with the overall budget process. And again, similar to my comments on other resources, obviously the city's balancing a lot of resources. I can't sit here and say for sure that we'll be able to do that. But at a minimum, I feel like we'll have the information to know what the scope and the scale might look like.
I think that's helpful to know, and I think that might factor into our discussion too, if we're going to go through it large planning process or anticipate going through a large planning process, which of these might benefit from that planning versus what might make sense regardless of what that planning process says. So thank you for the update, and I'm sorry that I failed to update on what the master plan committee did. We did meet, the subcommittee did.
I think you mostly even liked it.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Yeah.
All right, any other commission proposed business? Motion to adjourn. Commissioner Gabrandel, Commissioner Woods, we are adjourned. Thank you.